Hey guys, welcome to Raw Customs Jeep Mods. This episode I'm going to be adding some T-rails to the side of my Jeep for some additional outside storage. Now if you have a Jeep, you know you're always looking for a little bit of extra storage and a way to mount extra things. And there's just certain things that I don't want to put inside the cab of my vehicle, like a can of gas. So I had an idea to use some T-rails on the side that will allow me to build something to hold a jerry can, as well as making other things to hold like small boxes or a molly panel on the side of the Jeep. So one of the criteria I had when coming up with this idea is whatever I did, I wanted to be able to slide it on and take it off very quickly, say roughly around 5 minutes. So along with the T-rails, I actually added some speed nuts to the equation. So this is what I came up with. Check it out, let me know what you think. Hopefully that gives you a few ideas of your own. For the side mounts, I used an assortment of washers, 1024 nylon lock nuts, 1024 1.25" flathead bolts, and 4 2-foot T-rails. To start, I centered the rail at the top of the back window. I lined up the top of the rail with the seam that joins the top panel to the side. I used a punch to mark the back hole of the rail and then drilled out the first hole in the side of the top. Next, I ran a bolt through the back hole in the rail and through the top to hold it in place. This allowed me to easily line up the rail and mark my front hole. Then the front hole was punched, drilled, and bolted in place. Once I had a bolt at each end, they were tightened down snug. Then all the holes in the center were marked using a punch. To line up the bottom rail, I drilled a hole in an aluminum 4-foot ruler, and then used a T-bolt to lock it down on the top rail. I lined up the back edge of the ruler with the back edge of the rail, and then used a speed square to line up the ruler. Next, the back edge of the bottom rail was lined up with the back edge of the ruler. I lined up the rail around 2 inches under the window, and then punched and drilled the back hole. Then used a bolt to hold the back side of the rail. Next, the ruler was moved from the back to the front edge of the top rail and squared up. Using the ruler, I set the front of the rail at the same measurement that I had at the back. Then marked and drilled the front hole. Then installed the front bolt and marked the remaining holes. Once all the holes were marked, I removed both rails and drilled out the remaining holes. To make sure I didn't have any leaks, I put black silicone around and inside each hole, and then installed the rail using all the bolts. On the inside, I added silicone to each bolt just to make sure I didn't have any leaks. Next, I installed a large washer followed by a smaller washer. I was trying to cover as much surface area with the washer on the back side as I could. Then I followed everything up with a nylon locking nut, and then all the bolts were tightened down snug. The bolts that I used were actually a little long, so I went ahead and cut off all the ends once everything was tightened down. So if you're going to do something like this yourself, I would recommend getting shorter bolts. Now I did put a set of rails on both sides of the Jeep, and now I can make mounts for whatever I need to carry. And the first thing is a jerry can holder. I started with some flat stock and cut it to length, a little bit longer than the distance of the rails. When I build stuff like this, I generally like to round over any outside corners. I laid out my 2 bars on the jerry can to figure out the best placement of everything. Then I took a measurement to make a couple of crossbars. Once the crossbars were made, they were lined up and marked. At this point, I did take my time and used a couple of squares to make sure everything was lined up, even and square, and then made my marks where the crossbars would go. With everything lined up, the crossbars were squared up and clamped in place. Once everything was clamped in place, I welded the crossbar seams top and bottom. Once the back section was all welded together, I marked and drilled out holes for the T-bolts. Next, I set the jerry can on the back section. Then I used a strip of cardboard to make a template for the main structure of the basket. This allowed me to figure out where I needed to make the bend and how long the overall piece needs to be. Once I had the template designed, it was laid onto some flat stock and all the marks transferred. Then 2 pieces were cut to length. Next, I lined up the 2 pieces together in my homemade bender. The 2 pieces were lined up, tightened down, and bent to 90 degrees. The 2 pieces were squared up at the bottom of the back section and then welded into place. Once both of the L brackets were welded on, I set the jerry can in place. Then I put a couple of spacers in between the bars and the jerry can just to make sure the can could slide in and out easily. The next step was to take a piece of 1/2 inch flat stock and lay it across the can. With the bars centered and set in place, I used a square to make marks on each side where the bends needed to be. I made my first set of bends and put it back in place. Then I lined up a straight edge across the bottom and made a mark for the bend that will wrap around the back of the can. Once everything was marked, the final bends were made. With the last 2 pieces of the cage bent, they were set in place, marked, clamped, and welded in place. Once everything was welded together, it was cleaned up, given a coat of primer, and finished off with 2 coats of duplicate bed liner. And now whenever I need to carry a gas can, I can just slide my mount in place, lock it down with the speed nuts, slide in the jerry can, and strap it down. One of the nice things about using the T-rails is the mounts can be slid forward and back, so there's a lot of adjustment here. And I'm not limited to just carrying the jerry can. I can make mounts for whatever I need to carry. I hope this video gives you guys some ideas. Good luck on your build, and thanks for watching.